So I was suspended, and then they permanently excluded me on charges of harassment and abuse for the statement, alleged statement, Adam Habib, you're supporting genocide. I mean, it included a misquoting of their own harassment policy, which says that harassment is anything around a protected characteristic. And I don't think supporting genocide is a protected characteristic. But, you know, it's very clear that even their own policies they don't follow because their agenda is clear to, you know, shut down anybody who supports Palestine, shut down anybody who speaks out against management. And it's very targeted specifically at SOAS, I think, because for decades SOAS has been a hotspot, a really important base for pro-Palestine organising. And as they're seeing the rise of the resistance around the world, they're targeting and trying to, you know, really shut down this student organising here. But there's been an explicit statement from the university in the past 2 years that they want to change the institutional culture, that they want a different class of students to attend. So they're trying to get away from this. You know, they're moving towards more courses in finance and management. They want a more corporate university. They say, oh, you know, we support free speech and protest as long as you don't criticize us. So where's the free speech and where's the right to protest? You know, it's non-existent really. And it's actually interesting because it's really copying the trends and the shifts of the British government, of the British state, who are also shutting down protests, criminalising people protesting, doing the same thing. We're seeing similar things at other universities. LSE are accusing their students of being terrorists. Newcastle, I've just seen today, in August, have announced a new policy banning any disruptive protests. I think what it shows is that disruptive protest works, you know, it puts them under threat, they feel threatened by our protest and they're trying to shut it down. So I think really every time we get this repression, these accusations, disciplinaries, it actually, you know, gives us more fuel to our fire to keep going, that we're going in the right direction. And you know that we know that for anyone in resistance, repression or suppression is inevitable. That's how power tries and holds on. And the more desperate and the more insecure power becomes, the more violent and the more repressive they act. And you know, I mean, we look at what's happening in Palestine, what's happened to their resistance. We look at what's happening in Sudan, what's the price of their resistance has been all around the world. So, you know, these people who are in resistance have been struggling for years. Students' Union was, you know, a real physical centre of that organising. The Students' Union, there was an upstairs and a downstairs. You know, you see the walls covered in radical messages of solidarity, of commitment to revolution, of condemnation of dictatorial leaders, both inside and outside the university. And they've basically had a real attempt to sanitize it. 2 years ago, during a student occupation of the management corridor, that was making solidarity with university workers who were on strike over pay and casualisation, was also putting forward student demands around academic boycott with Israeli universities. And during the occupation, the response to the management was they got a team of painters and they came and literally whitewashed the walls of the university as a kind of punishment, you know, to say that no, you can't even have your own students' union spaces. I mean, this year, back in March, they tried to make a disciplinary investigation against me for putting a banner up in the Students' Union which said, "Fire Habib," which has been a long-running campaign to, you know, students, staff have all voted in their democratic forums to get rid of the director, that we don't want him as the director of the university. And even just expressing that in a Students' Union space, they tried to have a disciplinary offence against me for that. So there's really you know, anyone who tries to challenge or even question the management is really being shut down. Four of us, 4 candidates, actually backed by a big section of the student body, ran in the elections, won overwhelmingly in the elections, on this platform of, you know, a students' union that supports Palestine proudly and strongly, a students' union that stands up to management, that defends the independence of the student voice. And, you know, we knew they didn't like it, but we won. We got a lot of silence from after that. And then on the first day of our job, 15th of July, 2 of us, myself and my friend Alex, we received emails at 9:30 a.m. We were supposed to start at 10 a.m. At 9:30 a.m. we received an email that said, the Board of Trustees has decided, because of your critical stance towards the university, that you are unsuitable to be in this job, so we're dismissing you, you know, arbitrarily, with no process, no hearing, no real evidence put forward, no process. And that is now being appealed as well and going through legal issues, but it's obviously a huge affront to any notion of student democracy. They've obviously chosen the summer period to do it when students aren't on campus, so they feel like they can get away with it more. But we obviously call fighting back. A lot of the societies have already put out statements condemning what's taken place, saying, look, this is our students' union, we voted in the election, we choose our candidates, it's not for anybody else to interfere. They're trying to manage out any kind of space for critical discourse, critical dissent, bases for organising. And so now they've seen the students' union, and it's actually one of the few students' unions left in the country that still remain, well, did have some independence until very recently, and they're really trying to hit it, trying to wipe out that independence. So we had the encampment in front of SOAS for 3 months, and it was on the green there. And originally, I think the university didn't really have a choice because they saw how huge support from staff, from students, from wider communities were coming down. And they kind of tried to give this narrative of, okay, we'll accept the camp as long as they don't make too much noise or as they don't target any individuals in the university. And that was reflecting this kind of anti-protest policy that they've introduced in the last year, which has essentially outlawed any criticism of individuals, So even though you have a director who very clearly individually calls a lot of the shots, it's banned to hold him accountable for the decisions that he makes. And so throughout the 3 months, it was a very powerful space, I think. There was a lot of educational sessions that went out on the teach outs. It was also a chance for, us as students to live together, and work out how do we manage the practicalities of living in tents outside in central London. It was also a space that really strengthened a lot of connection to the situation in Gaza. So we had daily updates that were shared in camp meetings around what's the situation on the ground. We had calls with actually other students who are both in Gaza and in the West Bank. We had visits from other universities. We had people who were at conferences at SOAS come and share with us and engage with the encampment. Really powerful and really positive space, I think. But despite that, senior management point blank refused to come and speak to us. Their response was to hire a lot of private security or sometimes they would say they're there to protect us, but it was very clear they're actually there to protect the building. Because when we were under threat, when actually Zionist agitators came to the camp, told us they were former IDF soldiers, and they wanted to know how many Arabs were here, the security stood by and did nothing. When those Zionists then called the police on us, making false allegations against us, security again did nothing. When police came and started brutalizing violently members of the camp, and students were on the ground needing medical attention, asking a security guard to call the police, and he said, I don't want to get involved. So I spent all this money on private security, but absolutely no duty of care, no safeguarding towards their own students.
Move back. Move back.
But instead of engaging with us in the conversation, what they did was, so the grass that we were on actually belongs to University of London, which is a federation that SOAS is part of. And SOAS gave names of 4 students to University of London. And University of London then took a court case against us 4 students to claim possession back of the land. And they were trying to claim costs against us, knowing that we're, all undergraduate students trying to claim thousands of pounds of legal costs against us. We came to a deal with them that we wouldn't challenge them in court in return for them not taking the court costs against us, because we know court is really not a favourable terrain for us to fight on, and we didn't want to have to pay money to lawyers and courts when we actually want to raise money and send it to Palestine. So we couldn't fight that, unfortunately, court order. They came with bailiffs, they moved us once. We moved to a different patch that wasn't included in the possession order. And the second time, they didn't even bother going to court. They just called bailiffs and did a so-called civil law eviction, which is legally a very grey area. And in that process, they physically removed us. So 5 of these, they called themselves bailiffs. They didn't have any identification, didn't tell us who they're working for. Just dragged us out of the ground. Several of us got injured in that process because they're very rough. And they also, in that process, so we obviously, in a surprise eviction like that, we couldn't carry everything with us. They assured us all our belongings would be kept inside the university and we could pick them up after midday. When we went after midday to get our belongings, we were told they hadn't been kept in the university. They'd been thrown onto a patch of grass where the original encampment was, that was fenced off. We were prevented from getting them back for another day. When we eventually could go and access that patch of grass, we found our belongings literally thrown all over the place, you know? Bags of stuff that had been emptied out and tipped around in different areas. And there was specifically a few really important items, some valuable items, and some very important items. One I have to touch on is a painting that someone had made. It was a painting of a friend called Habib. Habib is a nursing student in Gaza. His university building has been destroyed by the bombardment in the genocide. We've been trying to raise funds for him so he can evacuate his family safely first of all, and so he can continue his studies elsewhere. And this painting had been produced of Habib, and it was called Habib's Dream was the name of the painting. It showed him as a nurse, you know, as his dream was to become. And that painting was with us when we got evicted. They assured us it would be kept safe, and we've not seen it again, and they have not told us the whereabouts of it. So they've actually stolen this painting of us. Essentially, they're trying to punish us by punishing our friends in Gaza, you know? Really disgusting the way these people are acting. And so, yeah, I think so we're up against, I think we can also see a precedent for this as well, because we know that Habib, who's the director of SOAS, the last university that he worked at, WITS, in South Africa, he did something similar, actually a lot more violent even, when he called military police onto the campus, also to deal with protesters there. So he's got a track record of doing this kind of thing. And we reckon that's actually probably why he was hired by the SOAS, Board of Trustees, was to shut down protest. Someone that you know feels no conscience against violently evicting students. So we've also said, look, whatever you do against us, our vision, our focus is the same. It's talking about what's happening in Gaza and demanding an end to the complicity. So that's how we set up the third encampment, to show that we're not going to back down. We're going to keep going. We're in a more public place now, which is actually really good because we're interacting with a lot more members of the public and telling them what's going on at SOAS. And you know, almost everyone we talk to is shocked that a university is acting this way, really angry at the university. And I think we can see really every day SOAS's reputation just gets further and further into the gutter, because a university that claims expertise on the Middle East but cannot call it genocide and cannot even accept their own students raising their voices, actually talking about the very same issues that they claim to teach us about inside. Their response is violent eviction, forcing us off campus, suspending us, expelling us. There's no legitimacy of an educational institution like that.